People talk about, I want to build a personal brand. And like, I don't think you are. I think you're building a personal bland.
Yeah.
It's very bland what you do. There's no seasoning. There's no flavor.
I couldn't raise my prices just because my inner voice was telling me that I'm not worth it. You know? And one client deliberately, he said, I'm gonna make you take more.
For me, understanding and watching my fellow graduates at Art Center celebrate their culture was an awakening moment for me. I don't go into meetings apologizing for who I am. I celebrate who I am. I only work with clients who can acknowledge and appreciate the differences.
And I can relate to what you're saying because Soviet Union was a communistic country and Ukraine is doing everything in our power to get rid of this heritage. And I think I have this additional motivation to create my personal brand.
In my opinion, if you want to build a strong personal brand in the 21st century, there are three things you need to do. Number one is...
Hey everyone, welcome to the Be Yourself podcast, the podcast on expressing our true self. Today, a very special day. I'm truly honored to greet Chris Do on my show. Chris is a personal branding coach who spent the last decade building a global brand with millions of followers across multiple platforms. He's got more than 2.7 million on YouTube, 1 million or so on Instagram, 600,000 on LinkedIn. And what's most important, that he did it by not following what others did, but by being truly himself. So Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Serhiy.
Chris, I want to start off by talking about the newest release on thefuture.com, the handbook called Unblend Yourself. It's unsubtle art of standing out in a noisy world, PDF workbook. Chris, what prompted you to create this piece and why did you call it precisely Unblend Yourself?
Okay, so I'm going to do a little storytelling time, okay?
Okay.
I'm unfamiliar with this concept of being an influencer, a design celebrity, or someone who has an audience. And I'm new into the space. This is 10 years ago in 2014. I'm creating content. And that's not to say, and I don't want to dismiss my own expertise and influence over local communities because I'm a teacher at this point. I've been teaching for, I think, over 10 years at that point. And I run a small design studio agency in Los Angeles, and I'm starting to create content. And somewhere along the way, this kind of arc is happening at the same time. In 2014, I'm making content, and there's a gentleman by the name of Aaron James Draplin who comes on the radar as this new kind of buzzworthy designer that people seem to be talking about, especially young people. And I become really intrigued by this person because I know nothing about him, but there's already like a lot of kind of like positive word of mouth about this guy. And if you don't know who he is, he's from the Midwest here in the United States. He's a big bearded guy, wears a jean jacket and a trucker cap. And he speaks very plainly, kind of very folksy, very direct and clear, drops a couple of F-bombs, and is very, very endearing to people. And my community wanted to know, like, how do we become like that? Is that something that is available to all of us? And I started going down this rabbit hole. I selected a handful of people that I admire, look up to, that are part of like the design elite. And I started to look at comparisons in terms of what they had that were similar to each other and what was different. And there was a lot more in common with each other, even though they're not related at all. So I became really interested and I started teaching it. I started talking about it. And in teaching and researching it, I started to realize what I was doing. And I started to turn up the dial. And so there are three key principles I just want to share really quickly, okay?
Yeah.
In my opinion, if you want to build a strong personal brand in the 21st century, there are three things you need to do. Number one is figure out a way to be meaningfully different. If you're the same as everyone else, if you're like a bag of rice and you're the same as every other bag of rice, well, what do we compete on? We compete on price. Always. If we cannot see the difference between A or B, we're going to compete on price every single time. So you have to find a way to be different.
Become a commodity, right?
Yeah, not to the anti-commodity approach. If you can't figure out a way to be different, you're going to disappear. Number 2, as part of a big concept, is to have the courage to be disliked. It's really important here. Now, this happens to also be the name of a book that I like a lot, but the idea pretty much sums that up. The courage to be disliked, because before we can gain fans, we have to make a couple of enemies.
Should we chase after this goal? Kind of even want to create a few enemies?
I don't think we create them, and I don't think we should want to do it because some internet influencer told you need to have some enemies. I think there's some things that are very principled inside of you that you stand against, right? So, for example, as it relates to you and what your country's going through, sovereignty, that's kind of an idea that we kind of believe in, and freedom and the right to choose, and the fight against tyranny. So if we're principled people and this is happening, it automatically has to become our enemy. And so there's something really interesting. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so if we hate certain things, and because it comes from a deep-rooted belief that are part of our values, and we start to communicate this, then people who hate the same things, all of a sudden we become like brothers and sisters. It's really important. The opposite of this is to try to be friends with everyone. In America, we call it like being very politically correct, always using the right terms, being very careful about how you say things, the phrasing of things. This happens a lot in academic circles because we try to be as inclusive as possible, and we try not to say anything that might offend anyone. And I heard Jordan Peterson say this. He said something like, to be a critical thinker, you must risk being offensive, because to think critically, it is offensive. Okay, so I just want to land that idea and tell you the third key principle, and we can unpack it all and answer all the questions. The third one is the last, and it seems on the surface very superficial and not worthy of the same kind of consideration as the first two, but that would be a mistake. The third principle is to be aesthetically discerning, to have really high standards for high quality and good taste, because when you put all those things together, a thing is beautiful. If a thing is beautiful, that's shorthand for quality. When we look at a beautiful car or a jacket, a handbag, or home, we automatically assume it must be high quality. And the reason why is because over 50% of our brain is dedicated to visual processing. So when we grab a bottle of wine, we make decisions about how that wine's going to taste and the quality of it before we even drink it, before we even swallow or take our first sip. This happens with everything. This is why companies like Apple excel, because they understand those sometimes tangible and intangible qualities that people like. And so the classic example is always look at how an iPhone is packaged versus every other company on the market. And you think to yourself, they all have millions and billions, maybe not trillions, but they have a lot of money. Why can't they just pull off what Apple does? Because Apple has a deep-rooted culture of excellence in design, in photography, in typography and printing. So from the very first moment in which you unwrap that phone to the time that you sell it or trade it in, you've had a pleasurable experience, a transcendent experience. It feels like we're better people because we've experienced something that's really beautiful. You could say the same thing about art, sculpture, and architecture. So the Eiffel Tower is this beautiful thing that people come to, and it's generated billions, if not trillions of dollars for the city of Paris or the Louvre Museum. We come to see these things because we want a transcendent experience. And you could experience this at Stonehenge, at the Egyptian pyramids. And so we underestimate the value of beautiful things. So we must be aesthetically discerning. Those are the three key principles.
And I heard Kevin O'Leary telling the story about Steve Jobs, that Steve would say that people don't know what they want. I will tell what they want, And when you say we have to have these unreasonably high standards, that's because we want our consumers to at some point get to this point as well, right? Because without these standards, we wouldn't even know that we might want something so aesthetically beautiful like an iPhone.
Yes. Well, let's just take it back to ancient times. I'm talking about not Cro-Magnon, but like we're talking about cave people who want to beautify a cave by painting on it and depicting life in the caves of Lascaux. So this is not a new concept. The instant you give people an opportunity to be creative and express themselves, to play, they try to beautify the world around them. And so the people, and they're not always, it's not that everybody has this, but the leaders do, and the artists do, the visionary do. I mean, if you think about the term visionary, it means to see the future, to see ahead or beyond the curve, see things that people can't see today. That's what visionary means. And it ties directly into what I'm talking about, because if 50% of our brain is dedicated to visual processing, it's not like it's not a coincidence that we use this term visionary. You could see things before people can see them. So if you want to lead, this is how you lead people.
So talking about unblending ourselves, why unblend? That's partly you answered, but would you like to add something?
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about here and a lot to unpack. Okay. So if we look at modern society, the industrial education system that was built mostly by the British Empire was to create a human machine, to create a human computer so that they can plug us into the field, into the ditches. If one person dies, you just swap them out. So it wasn't about trying to elevate us, to get us to be critical thinkers, to be divergent thinkers. In fact, that was the opposite. They want us all to be the same. So it's much easier to grow an empire this way. And so we inherit an education system that is designed to stamp out individuality and critical thinking. It's really wild. Okay. So if you have a child, or if you're a product of basically public education, which is what we have here in America mostly, you learn really early that if you ask too many questions, if you look strange, people will treat you strangely and you'll be ostracized by the community. And what that means is you're going to be left behind. You won't have safety in social networks. And especially at a time when we're really vulnerable, we don't know who we are. The last thing that we want is to be alone. Now, my parents, we traveled a lot, meaning we moved from city to city because we're coming from war-torn Vietnam in 1975. We're refugees, immigrants. We're in the lower class, and they're hardworking. They're moving up in the world, and so we're moving slowly from lower to lower middle, from lower middle to middle to upper middle, and then finally upper class. And so I didn't have a stable childhood in terms of like where I was going to call my friends. We moved a lot. I think I calculated every year and a half I was changing schools. So one of my greatest fears as a child, as an early teenager, was who am I going to eat lunch with? Not who am I, but who am I going to eat lunch with? Because the last thing I want to do is eat by myself, because I can see everyone has friends they're hanging out with. And here's this loner who's weird, going to hang out by himself. And so what we've learned really early on is we go along to get along. We just go along with what the trend is. So if everyone looks a certain way, has a certain haircut, wears certain brands, says certain things, likes certain sports and music, then there's a lot of safety there. Yeah. And so we've learned really well to blend in. And you know what? In the corporate space, in the business space, there's literally a thing called the corporate code of dress, business attire. It's usually a button-up suit, a tie, a jacket, appropriate shoes. And every once in a while, we have casual Fridays and we allow people to not wear a tie. That's casual Fridays, okay? It's not that you can come in with something else. Just you don't have to wear a tie today. You could dress down a little bit. And so if you walk along in New York in the financial district, everybody dresses the same. same haircut, same power suit, and they go to the same places to eat because this is what successful people do.
Yeah.
So you can see right now, we've learned how to blend in. We've learned how to be beige. We know how to be vanilla, and that is boring. It's very forgettable. And so what we have to do is instead of, and people talk about, I want to build a personal brand. I'm like, I don't think you are. I think you're building a personal bland.
Yeah.
It's very bland what you do. There's no seasoning. There's no flavor.
We need to have courage to be disliked. Yes, sir. And I can relate to what you're saying because Soviet Union was a communistic country and Ukraine is doing everything in our power to get rid of this heritage. We don't want to be like everyone else. We're not like Russia. We're not like Belarus. We're globally oriented individuals who want to build the new future for our country. And Russia's not letting us doing this. They're really, really hurt by the fact that we're just not going to be like them. And I think I have this additional motivation to create my personal brand. And I want to ask you, have you managed to create yours? Obviously, your parents fled Vietnam in 1975, right? April the 30s. And
75, yep.
Yeah, we have different stories. I've lived my entire life in Ukraine, never been to any English-speaking country. You learn the language by watching NBA basketball. But still, you immigrated and you had to survive, learn the new culture. So how were you able to not only blend, but actually create a unique voice that is globally recognized today?
Yeah, I know this is a stereotype. I'm a little reluctant to say this, but I'll say it. Asians are known as being very fast at assimilating. Of all the different immigrants that have come to America, we assimilate. And I think it's
really well. Okay.
Yes, we assimilate really fast and well. And there's a bunch of good things about that, and there's a bunch of really bad things about that. I think a lot of it comes from like Confucianistic culture and philosophy, which is to serve society, to put the society ahead of the individual. It's kind of very socialist in its kind of approach there, right? So when we come to America, I'm 3 years old, so I don't have any memory of my mother country. Okay. And I didn't understand why we look and sound so different. I just knew we did, and I couldn't figure it out. But one of the things that my parents did, which was different than their siblings, was to say, do what you need to do to learn the culture as fast as you can. Speak the language, learn their ways, because we won't be able to help you. They're
drop you in the water. Boom.
Well, right? What else? What other choice? Because my parents barely speak English themselves. I mean, if you think about it, it's like they don't understand the culture any better. They're in the work environment doing what they can, so they understand work environments. And they would share stories with us.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
They shared stories with us. Like when we first landed in America, we landed where our sponsor family was, which was in Kansas City, Missouri. And I remember them telling stories about how they would go to McDonald's and sit down and like, this looks like everybody's having a really good time. And they just sat down and waited for 30 minutes for a waiter to come by and take their order. And they're not quite sure what's going on. And eventually they go to the counter. It's like, what do we have to do to get somebody to come to our table? It's like, oh, you order here, you pay here. It was a strange concept for them. And I'll tell you one little funny story. My uncle, my dad's younger brother, he and his wife were driving around in a suburban neighborhood, and he saw a sign. It says garage sale. And he turns to his wife. He goes, America's so great. It's like there's so much opportunity for people here. Even if you don't have enough money to buy the whole house, you could just buy the garage. And he's like, I'm going to buy the garage for us one day. That's my uncle, And if you don't understand that joke, it's because it's not literally a garage for sale. They're just selling stuff they don't want on the driveway, basically, or in the garage. And so there's a lot of cultural shock. So imagine if they were to try to teach us, they would teach us all the wrong things. So their whole thing is you're going to go to school and you need to learn everything that you can learn so that you can adapt and survive and thrive. And so we assimilate really fast. Now, of course, the bad part to this is, unlike my cousins who are very fluent in Vietnamese and understand the culture really well and eat all the foods, and I don't eat all of them myself. I eat a lot, but I don't eat everything. I've lost a little bit of that connection to my own culture. And I've almost assimilated too well. And there's an arc to the story. So you try to be like everyone else. You assimilate really quickly. What happens is then you start to lose your own identity, which is pretty obvious at this point. And I start to develop a kind of identity crisis where I look down on my own culture. I don't understand why we do what we do, why we're so loud and our food has a strong aroma to it. And it's just so weird. And so I go through a period of self-hate for my teens into my late teens until I figure it out. And I'll tell you the moment that changed it for me. Eventually I go to art school, a private art school, and I'm seeing different cultures, and everyone is united by their love for expressing themselves through creativity, through the visual arts. So I'm now, I think, 22 years old. I'm at graduation, and I've already become a little bit bitter about school and everything. So I have a funky attitude. Okay. I thought about dropping out a couple of times, but I go to the graduation ceremony and I see all kinds of Asians dressed in their traditional attire. Right? So the long dress and the colors and the patterns and their headdress of people from Korea, from Japan, from China. I don't think there was any other Vietnamese person there. And they were very proud to celebrate their culture, their language, their identity. And it made me took inventory on myself, which was like, I have never seen Asians represent themselves this way. And then I figured out why, okay? Because these people grew up where they were part of the dominant culture. They only came to America to go to school. They didn't grow up here. They weren't picked on. They weren't bullied. They weren't ostracized. Where they come from, they're the man or the woman. And to come to America to go to a very expensive private art school meant they had means. So you can't get in as a foreign student if you can't prove that you have the financial ability to pay. So not only were they part of the dominant culture, they're upper class in their culture, and their parents were forward thinking enough to allow them to go and study abroad. So they had a lot of things going for them. And I had not seen that because every Asian person that I knew was an immigrant to America where we weren't part of the dominant culture. So we had a different story. And I find something really interesting. I saw a piece on social media recently about why the stereotypical Asian man in America, the view of the stereotypical Asian man has been weak, asexual, very nerdy, and not very manly, very effeminate. And that's not a good thing. Okay. But all of a sudden, K-pop, Korean culture, has become so dominant in K-dramas, movies, and music that the new standard for men is to not have some of the toxic masculinity anymore. So these K-pop stars tend to have very effeminate characteristics. Some of them wear makeup, and women and men, mostly women, and some men are like, wow, that's the new standard. So they've completely flipped the paradigm from the Asian man not being very desirable in America to being quite desirable. And it's kind of interesting to see this happening on such a global level.
That's dope. Chris, it's funny. I was reluctant to tell you the story or not, but I was using a made-up name for 7 years of my business life. I actually picked the name Chris also, and I used the name Chris for 7 years as I was building my first business. It was an international e-commerce copywriting business. And I would cold call to Americans at night because of the time difference. And I would call myself Chris just because I was afraid of the reaction if they would hear Serhiy. Right? So it's only roughly 7 years ago as I started calling myself Serhiy. And it was such a liberating experience, Chris. I think that all of us who want to blend in, who want to get rid of accent, this is something that Asian people want to do. We're going to get rid of their accent to sound more American. No, I think these things, these imperfections, they make us us, right? And I think you wrote it on the Unblend Yourself landing page that trust requires transparency. Are you ready to be real you?
Yeah. And I think we all go through some of this, especially if we don't feel safe, if we're not part of the power structure. I'm sure if you grew up as part of the top 1% in your country, you wouldn't have any of these questions at all. It's quite interesting too to see my wife's family, who's originally from Taiwan, her cousins, they named their children with the names that they would have named them if they were in Taiwan and living in America. So times have changed a lot. So names that are hard to pronounce, that are very ethnic in sounding and the way that they're written, force other people to kind of meet you where you're at. Whereas when I was growing up, like, I don't want to force you to do anything. In fact, I don't want you to notice the fact that I'm different. I want to be the same. And so for me, understanding and watching my fellow graduates at Art Center celebrate their culture was an awakening moment for me. And I teared up a little bit because I was filled with so much shame and guilt that I had for a long period of time, looked down on my own culture, my own ethnicity. And now I was like, I have a new teacher. And from this point forward, I promised myself, never play small, own who you are, and start to live this life. And I took that into the corporate world, and I ran my business for 20, I guess we're on our 30th year, technically, running 2 different companies. But I don't go into meetings apologizing for who I am. I celebrate who I am. And I only work with clients who can acknowledge and appreciate the differences. And if they can't, then I am not for them. I'm okay with that.
As you once said, you're going to teach us charge as much that will make our moms nervous. And I definitely can relate to this, my man, because my mom's, her entire life, she counts money. And I have this mentality, this scarcity mentality ingrained in me. I'm a video production agency owner. We also run YouTube for podcasters. And I couldn't raise my prices just because my inner voice was telling me that I'm not worth it, you know? And one client deliberately, he said, I'm gonna make you take more. So my client gave me more than, you know, so it was just such an eye-opening experience, Chris, that for some reason, our self-esteem dictates how much we can take from this world in exchange for real value that we bring.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, that's not a surprise. How you see yourself is how you conduct yourself and the actions that you take. So if you don't see yourself as a person who's worthy of getting more, you will never ask for more, and you will always ask for less, thinking, I don't even deserve this, what I'm asking for right now. So it takes a very generous, kind, and empathetic client to say, you know what, you got to start charging more. And I just don't feel right even getting this from you. And most clients are just happy to pay the lowest price possible. And this person starts to send you on a path, and then hopefully has made some real, you've made permanent changes in the way that you look at yourself.
Chris, I want to, in the same vein, I want to quote Winston Churchill, who said that you can never, ever let a good crisis go to waste. And I think the co-founder of LinkedIn, Rick Hoffman, his name, also had his variation of this rule, that crisis, we cannot miss a crisis. Does crisis help in building a powerful personal brand?
Good question. I can definitively say a good crisis helps to build a powerful character. And if brands are built on personalities and character, then it's pretty safe to assume the answer is yes. There is a phrase, I forget the exact phrasing, but it's something like this: hard times make for good men. And good men make for good times, and good times makes for easy men, and easy men make for hard times.
And it's goes and
something like that. It goes in a weird circle, right? So let's just explain and unpack that. I think I don't need to over explain this, but if you don't have a lot, you become very resourceful. If you have to endure a lot of pain in the moment, it's terrible and it's heartbreaking. But the ones who survive, like literally and figuratively, are stronger because of that. And then they are able to figure things out, and they're so capable. Like, for example, I'm less capable than my father. My father can take apart an engine. He can figure out how to fix the motor, a computer. I mean, he can fix a lot of things. And he's developed a reputation in our family that my kids call him Mr. Fix-It, because grandpa can fix everything. Now my wife's like, hey, this is a problem. I'm like, what do you want me to do about that? Let's call somebody. I'll Google it, and then we'll just hire someone to do it, right? So we're not as capable. And I imagine my father's father was even more capable than him, and so on and so forth. So the harder it is, the times in which we go through, the ones who emerge stronger. And so my kids don't have a lot of hardship. They grew up mostly in one house. I have mostly gone to private school. So they haven't been in physical fistfights. They haven't been threatened with a weapon or anything like that. I'm not saying I have, but these times make for really tough people. This is why also some of the best music comes from Black culture in America, because Black culture has not had a good time here, historically speaking. Right? And
like
so
diamonds need pressure.
Yeah. And, there's this thing about, I watch a silly show. It's called Forged in Fire, where they have 4 blacksmiths make a weapon, a knife or a dagger or sword or something like that. So there's 4 blacksmiths that work on this. I didn't realize this, but what is steel? Steel is iron. Iron is not very valuable. It's not nearly considered like the value of steel, but iron and steel are the same. Iron becomes steel through heat and through pressure, and the amount of carbon exists within the iron. So it's kind of crazy to me that you can stick something that's kind of ugly, not that valuable, into a crucible, raise the temperature, and smash it with a hammer, heat and pressure. And you pound out the impurities. It's kind of weird. You're like folding carbon, I think, or something like that, and iron ore together. And it's like, wow. Now, for all the blacksmiths, I apologize. And that's kind of what I remember reading.
Hey folks, thanks for checking the first part of my conversation with Chris. In the second part that we will drop just in a few days, we talk with Chris about enjoying the moment, aligning our passion with our profession, the value of business coaches, and I will also ask Chris one main takeaway from 2025 that he'll take with him to 2026. If you want to support me, please subscribe, leave some comments, or maybe check out some other videos I have on that channel. Thanks a lot, and see you soon.